On November 18, 1928, Walt Disney and Ub Iwerks released a short animated film called Steamboat Willie. It played a pivotal role in animation history for two reasons. One, it was the first ever synchronized cartoon with sound, and two, it marks Mickey Mouse's first appearance in a publicly distributed film. Steamboat Willie has also played a pivotal role in copyright history, having nearly entered the public domain and just avoiding it twice. It will likely continue being a hot topic of conversation in the upcoming years, so let's get into it. I'll start by explaining what copyright is. In essence, copyright law protects the creator or owner of a piece of intellectual property for a given time period, allowing them protection over their artistic, literary, dramatic, or musical work. Copyright tends to have more to do with an artistic creation rather than, say, scientific inventions. That's where patents come in. Now, the amount of time that copyright lasts varies based on several factors. One, whether it was created before or after 1978. Two, whether the authors own the work. Or three, whether it was work for hire. If an author or authors own the work, they own the copyright for their lifetime plus 70 years of the last living author. If it's owned by a corporation, 95 years from its publication. So for example, if you were to write and publish a song today in the United States, you would be the copyright holder of that song for your lifetime plus 70 years. If Sony in turn hired you to compose a song, they would own it for 95 years from its publication. If another person or company then wants to perform the song or use the recording, they would need to pay the copyright holder royalties or license it. Once that time period expires, the copyrighted work then enters what's called the public domain, which is essentially a fancy term for stuff that's no longer copyrighted. Once work enters the public domain, it can be used without permission or compensation. But these laws have changed substantially in the last couple of decades. In fact, when Steamboat Willie was released, these laws looked very different. At the time of Steamboat Willie's release, copyright terms in the United States lasted a total of 56 years from publication, meaning that Steamboat Willie's copyright would have expired in 1984. But in the 1970s, Disney, among others, lobbied to extend the copyright terms by an additional 20 years, and their lobbying efforts led to the Copyright Act of 1976, which did just that. 2 decades later, Congress passed another act called the Copyright Extension Act of 1998, which added another 20 years to the renewal term, bringing us to the 95 years that we have today. Disney's lobbying efforts were so influential at the time that the 1998 Copyright Extension Act was nicknamed the Mickey Mouse Protection Act. So, not a great look for Disney. So that's it then. Clean and simple, January 1st, 2024, Mickey Mouse enters the public domain and we can all use Mickey's likeness without payment and attribution. Well, of course not, there's so much more video left. So this brings us to our next topic of conversation, trademarks. Unlike copyright, trademarks have less to do with artistic creations, but rather with brand identity. According to the United States Patent and Trademark Office, a trademark can be any word, phrase, symbol, or design, or a combination of these things that identifies your goods or services. It's how customers recognize you in the marketplace and distinguish you from your competitors. So it's the Nike swoosh and the McDonald's jingle. Now, a major difference between a copyright and a trademark is that trademarks can be renewed indefinitely. You register your trademark, and then you pay on usually a 10-year basis, and it belongs to you forever. And you better believe that Mickey Mouse is a registered trademark as of 1928, and it gets renewed by Disney every decade. Okay, let's jump forward in time a little bit. 2007. At this point, Disney had a major rebrand of the Walt Disney Animation Studios, and they started to use Mickey Mouse as the primary icon for their logo. This is what their logo currently is. And they also created an intro which I think you might recognize. So Walt Disney Pictures has the castle and the shooting star that we all know and love for any Disney release. But more specifically to animations, the Walt Disney Animation Studio has Mickey. By the way, you can search for all US trademarks on the United States Patent and Trademark website. I'll put a link below if you're curious to browse. You can find everything from the Mickey Mouse fonts to the Walt Disney Animation Studio's intro sequence to even things that haven't really even been released yet. Now, we can, venture a guess that this was all probably done very purposefully in order to just nail down the fact that Mickey belongs to Disney, it's trademarked to Disney, and look, we can see it in the logo, we can see it in the introduction, it's everywhere. Mickey is synonymous with Disney. So why does this all matter? Well, it's a complex subject that treads a fine path between art, business, plagiarism, and counterfeiting. The way things move forward will also set a precedent for so many other important works that come after Steamboat Willie. You see, this time period, the 1920s and onwards, saw the rise of a more homogeneous popular culture due to the growth in popularity of radio and the eventual rise of television. Characters and stories that to this day make up the fabric of popular culture can be traced back to the 1920s, 30s, and onward, and many of them will enter the public domain within the decade, such as, but not limited to, Superman, James Bond, Batman, and all the characters from The Hobbit. And if we take a look as to what these IPs are worth financially, it's no wonder that these companies want to protect them at all costs, because it would allow other studios and businesses to compete using the same ideas and potentially dilute their value. Additionally, to this day, we haven't really lived in a society that allows the repurposing of contemporary, popular intellectual property. So what might that even look like? Are we going to start seeing Disney's Mickey and Sony's Mickey and Universal Pictures Mickey? Who knows? We can take a glimpse into what this might look like if we see what's happening with Winnie-the-Pooh. Winnie-the-Pooh, the anthropomorphic teddy bear, was created by A.A. Milne and E.H. Shepard, and was first released under that name in 1926. That's 2 years before Mickey Mouse. 35 years after Winnie-the-Pooh's first appearance, in 1961, the Walt Disney Company licensed certain rights from the A.A. Milne estate, dropped the hyphens, that's an important note, and reintroduced the character the way we all most likely remember today. So if you've done the math, today, Winnie-the-Pooh is public domain, and we have been introduced to a very different Winnie-the-Pooh. Winnie-the-Pooh Blood and Honey. Winnie-the-Pooh Blood and Honey is an independent slasher film released in 2023, and by the way, it grossed nearly $5 million worldwide. But here's a few things to note. 1, the character is still referred to with its hyphens, just look at the movie poster. And 2, it looks nothing like Disney's version of Winnie-the-Pooh, which is still under copyright. And this is where we arrive at the next layer of complexity. Just because an idea enters the public domain does not mean that all interpretations of said idea enter the public domain. So while Mickey Mouse is public domain as of 2024, you still can't represent Mickey with white gloves, red shorts, and yellow shoes, because that iteration was published later. And that iteration won't enter public domain until 95 years from its publication. And all of this raises another important question, which is, we can use Mickey's likeness the way it was portrayed in Steamboat Willie, but we can also modify it. So how much modification is enough modification, or how much modification is allowed without it being too close to later versions of copyright? For example, if we start dressing Mickey, or if we add color to the character, is that no longer allowed? I think Winnie-the-Pooh Blood and Honey is a fascinating release because it is so different, but perhaps it also had to be. Disney, as of the recording of this video, has not sued, but that might not necessarily be the case if Winnie-the-Pooh were reimagined by a different animation studio and released as a children's television show, because at that point they would be in direct competition with Disney's market. At the end of the day, this all comes down to ownership of intellectual property and, of course, money. And while I do understand and agree that trademarks are protected, where do we draw the line? You might be watching this right now and think, well, Mickey Mouse is so unique and it is very clearly the icon of Disney, and I would totally agree with you. But if Disney were to, I don't know, for example, create a subsidiary for every character they own and trademark the character to each subsidiary, is that not just blatant circumvention of copyright law? Well, yeah. Let me give you a fictitious scenario of what I just described. Captain America is the trademark of Captain America Inc., a subsidiary owned by Disney. So of course you can't really argue Captain America, the trademark, belongs to Captain America Inc. It's the same logic that we're using for Mickey Mouse. But if you can do that with every character, then copyright law never expires, which was the whole point of it to begin with. So what I suggest is that we approach this from a completely different angle and see how the situation might differ. So far, we've talked exclusively about the entertainment sector. So here is another completely different example, the Michelin Man. The Michelin Man is one of the world's most well-known mascots, and it's about 30 years older than Mickey, having been introduced to the world back in 1894. The Michelin Man, or Bibendum, his actual French name, is trademarked to Michelin, the tire manufacturer. And although it is technically public domain, we have not really seen many recreations of Bibendum because, well, it's still trademarked to Michelin. So why should Disney's case be any different? And secondly, does it matter the medium in which these characters are repurposed? For example, if I used the Michelin Man's likeness as a logo and started selling tires, that could clearly be argued as counterfeiting. That makes sense. It's the whole point of trademarks, to be able to identify a company and protect their legitimacy. But what if I made a horror slasher about the Michelin Man? Is that not okay because it could hurt their sales? And if so, why is that any different from Winnie-the-Pooh Blood and Honey or a future Mickey Mouse release? Here's the thing. If a new film starring a character made from public domain material is not necessarily in direct competition with its trademarked business, perhaps that's less problematic. It's likely that Disney chose not to sue Blood and Honey because they were not infringing upon Disney's market, family and entertainment. And in case you're curious, yes, Winnie-the-Pooh still has trademarks out, owned by Disney. So I bring us all back to the same question: where do we draw that line? Because I can very clearly picture an instance where a new Mickey Mouse video game is released on a console and it's a horror game, kids accidentally buy it, and then that becomes a whole problem in and of itself. And if other companies put Mickey's likeness on their movies, television shows, and video games, we will probably purchase them thinking it's Disney. And how is that not counterfeiting? At a certain point, it will probably be damaging to these companies' brand image. And that is probably easy to dispute in the court of law. I bring up the Michelin Man because I dislike the idea that we single out artists and artistic creations as the only medium that expires with time. Just because the Michelin Man and Disney are in different fields does not mean that we should treat their trademarks any differently. That being said, copyrights expiring allow for different people to repurpose old material in new ways, regardless of whether they can pay for it, which is very valuable from an artistic point of view, and important from a competition point of view. It protects us, the people, from having major conglomerates such as Disney controlling the entire entertainment industry simply because they had the money to buy it to begin with. And that is sort of what we've seen from Disney, as they have continued purchasing major IPs throughout the years, such as Pixar, Marvel, and Star Wars. Allowing copyright expiration is a small way of controlling this. In any case, this whole video is simply the beginning of what's going to be a new and probably long conversation, as we will all have to learn how to navigate this new world of company-owned and trademarked public domain material. If you expected to finish this video with a concrete answer, I hate to tell you that we have more questions than answers. But what I do know is that things are about to change, and I'm sure we will hear of many lawsuits in the years to come. I have spoken my mind, and I am legitimately curious about what everyone's opinions are, because this is a complex topic. Are we going to need new laws? Should companies be able to trademark names, characters, and identities in order to hold on to their intellectual property indefinitely? And how do we draw the line between trademarks and copyright? Drop me a comment. I would love to hear your thoughts. Let's get this comment section going. I'm sure it can be a very engaging conversation. If you like this video, you can show me your appreciation by liking and sharing. And if you really like this video, you can subscribe, at which point I'll see you in the next video. Bye.